Let's just wait for the YouTube to wake up, make sure everything is happening. Oh, it looks like it's happening. How about that? Yes, it is happening. The internet has given us permission to go another day. I need a little water. All right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, salutations, good time, good party, good whatever's going on for you. I hope it's good. I hope you are well. I hope you are staying safe. I hope you are staying home. I hope you are staying cool. You can't stay young, but you can stay cool. Wise words from my buddy Tim Carroll. Check out that song. It's a great song. It's not the song of the day, though. Song of the day, going to be coming later. But, guys, so a lot is happening right now, and we're going to go straight to something pretty interesting here. The state of California is suing Uber and Lyft. This is because of a bill, a new piece of policy called AB5, and we're going to dive into this. This has been a controversial piece of legislation for a number of reasons. And there are some good factors here and some concerning factors here. And we're going to dive into it. First, let's dive into the lawsuit. So check this out. Oh, let me scroll up to the headline. California sues Uber and Lyft, claiming workers are misclassified. The ride-hailing companies are accused of defying a new state law that says gig workers should be treated as employees. So here's from the New York Times article. California's Attorney General and a coalition of city attorneys in the state sued Uber and Lyft on Tuesday, claiming the companies wrongfully classified their drivers as independent contractors in violation of a state law that makes them employees. The law, known as Assembly Bill 5, AB 5, requires companies to treat their workers as employees instead of contractors if they control how workers perform their task or if the work is a routine part of a company's business. At least 1 million gig workers in the state are affected by the law, which is supposed to give them a path to benefits like a minimum wage, unemployment insurance. This has traditionally been withheld from independent contractors. Although AB 5 took effect on January 1st, Uber, Lyft, and other gig economy companies that operate in California have resisted and are not taking steps to reclassify their drivers. Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash have poured $90 million in a campaign for a ballot initiative that would exempt them from complying with the new law. Uber has argued that its core business is technology, not rides, and therefore drivers are not a key part of its business. Wow. That's some good. Oh no, drivers, technology is what we do. That's really what we do. That's imagine logging into your Lyft and Uber app or Uber app, and you need a ride somewhere and you need to get somewhere, and you go, oh look, I just booked a ride. Look at how quick that was. Is the ride coming? Nope, the ride's never going to come. But really, this app's all about the technology. I got to book a ride, and now I can go for a ride in my head. I can imagine being at my hotel room or wherever it is that you were going to go. Because according to Lyft and Uber, driving people isn't the core of their business. The technology is the core of their business. So I guess without the drivers, they would operate just fine because it's about the technology, according to them. Wow, that is remarkable mental gymnastics. Quite impressive. Quite impressive. All right, so the lawsuit also claims the ride-hailing companies are engaging in unfair business practices that harms other California companies that follow the law. By avoiding payroll taxes and not paying a minimum wage, Uber and Lyft are able to provide rides at an artificially low cost, the suit claims, giving them a competitive advantage over other businesses. The suit seeks civil penalties and back wages for workers that could add up to hundreds of millions of dollars. California has ground rules with rights and protections for workers and their employees. We intend to make sure that Uber or Lyft play by the rules, says Xavier Becerra, California's Attorney General. The city attorneys of San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego joined in the lawsuit. California's move is a significant threat to gig companies and could influence other states with similar laws to take action against them, labor experts said. So here's what's going on here. AB 5 basically is a law that says you need to classify a lot of contract workers as employees. Now, in many ways, this is a good thing. In the case of Uber and Lyft, this is a good thing because it gives better protections to their workers. It gives better wages to their workers. And you're still going to be able to get a ride. It's just the workers are going to be treated better. They're going to get a decent hourly wage. They're going to get decent benefits. And you know what? It's not going to cause prices to go crazy. That's the argument that people always use. Like, well, now prices are going to be out of control. Look, Uber and Lyft are still going to want to be competitive with taxi companies. They're still going to want to offer something more convenient and cheaper. They're still going to want to do that. So they'll cut corners elsewhere so that a customer's ride isn't through the roof. They're not going to have their prices go through the roof and then no one uses their service anymore. They're not going to do that. You know, it's just like anything else. Well, what happens if my Big Mac's $20? That's not going to happen because no one will buy it. They'll do something else. So it's the same thing here. And where could they cut corners, you ask? Well, gee, there's a lot of Uber drivers that have to sleep in their cars while their CEO just bought a $172 million house. So I have a couple ideas. So that's what AB5 does. Now, there are some concerns around AB5, and the concerns are because there are different types of jobs and designations and positions where an employee designation is completely unnecessary. Something like a freelancer, or in my case, a comedian or a musician, something like that. It wouldn't make sense for a musician who's playing at a venue to be designated as an employee. That doesn't make sense for anyone involved. Same with a freelance writer who maybe contributes to a bunch of different places. Now, the AB5 legislation does have some carve-outs. In other words, there are some some workers, shouldn't say employees because they're not employees, some workers where this does not apply to them because it doesn't make any sense for anyone involved for it to apply to them. All right, so here's a couple things going on around this. So this is from the Hollywood Reporter. We'll go here first. Musician groups and California legislators propose gig economy law amendment. So the legislation would exempt the majority of musicians seeking to collaborate in the recording studio from having to enter into employer-employee relationships. Top musicians groups and 2 California legislators have unveiled a proposed amendment to the controversial gig economy law AB5 to ease its impact on music professionals. The amendment was represented as a compromise between AB5 author Assemblyman Lorena Gonzalez, Majority Leader Ann Calderon, and several musicians' rights groups, including the Recording Academy and the American Federation of Musicians, exempts the majority of musicians, vocalists, recording artists, composers, blah, 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 to AB5's strict ABC test to determine their worker classification in a recording studio. Now, and it looks like this is going to be successful because here's a headline from a law website. Music industry receives relief from AB5. So music industry receives relief from AB5. So here's the controversial ABC test that they're concerned about. Now, another concern, before we go to the bill itself, another concern going on in regards to this bill. Gig economy law author proposes legislation easing impact on freelancers. So there's another amendment that is going to end the, quote, controversial 35 submission cap. So what this is, there's a portion of the bill that says freelancers, like freelance writers and photographers, are exempt from this law unless they have 35 submissions per year or more for one publication or one outlet. Then that outlet needs to designate them an employee. So, and the logic behind that is, gee, think about it. There's 52 weeks in a year. 35 submissions is a lot of submissions. If somebody is submitting that much, you know, one could argue they are essential to the company and should be designated as an employee. However, what this amendment's hitting at is that, well, gee, it's not that simple. What about someone who is, this is just an example off the top of my head. What about someone who's syndicated? What about a freelancer who maybe they write these certain pieces or articles and they appear in a bunch of different outlets all the time, and they make their living accordingly. and they want it that way, and with 35 plate or however many outlets publish them, would they all have to designate that person an employee? How would that work? That doesn't seem feasible or even possible. And it doesn't seem like that'd be a winning scenario for anyone involved in this, for instance. So that's why they're saying we need to ease up on that because it's not always applicable. So here's the bill itself. And here is the thing that everybody is concerned about in the freelance world, where freelancing is appropriate, is the ABC test. So let's scroll down for that specifically. We're not going to go through the entire bill. But there's a basic, okay, so here is essentially the ABC test. I know it's kind of, all right, so the ABC test that everybody is a little bit concerned about, and some people are actually freaking out about. Okay, here it is. A person is free, so this is where you can still stay as an independent contractor. The person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. Okay. The person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. That's the one people are concerned about. All right. C, the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. Okay. Now they have all these, different entities and different types of professions that are exempt from this as well. But here's the thing that a lot of creative professionals are taking concern with in this ABC test. The big part is B. The person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So let's use me, for example, as a comedian, just for ease of example's sake in what AB5 is all about. Okay, so number A. Well, number A. Wow, I just said that. Okay, A, which is number 1. Number A. A's a number now because I said so. All right. The person is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in connection with the performance of the work, both under the contract for the performance of the work and in fact. Okay, so when I go do comedy at a comedy club, no comedy club is telling me what to say or how to say it. I do my act that I do in any other venue. The only control and direction is that, the show starts at a certain time. And that's something that we all agree on. So A, as a comedian at a comedy club, I meet that. I meet A. All right. B, the person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. Ooh, now it gets a little complicated, doesn't it? Because, comedy club. Comedy club. Comedy is in the name. So somebody doing comedy, one would assume that person is not outside of the usual course of the hiring entity's business. You're a comedy club. Yeah, that's a comedian. Yeah. Okay, sounds like that doesn't meet the requirement in B. All right, so C, the person is customarily engaged in an independently established trade, occupation, or business of the same nature as that involved in the work performed. A comedian performs at clubs all over the country. So, yeah. So meeting A and C, in my case, as a comedian, or anyone's case as a touring comedian, and you can just substitute comedian for musician, same thing. A and C are very easily met. B is where the waters get a little muddy. The person performs work that is outside the usual course of a hiring entity's business. Well, if you're a music venue, music is kind of the usual course of the business, right? Comedy is the usual course of the entity's business, right? But here's the thing. Here's where I think, first of all, there's a number of ways that we could solve this. One is already happening, just a carve out for musicians. And that amendment's already there, a carve out for musicians. That's already happening, and it'll be extended to, and I'm sure there's going to be something in there for other types of performing artists. So that'll cover comedians, that'll cover actors, and whatever else where it is appropriate. So that's one thing, just a straight up amendment. The other thing is, the argument could be made that, the business is still food and beverage. There are times where a comedy club is open and there is no comedy happening on the stage. So where they're just serving drinks, so they're getting ready to open and they're just serving drinks and food. And, most establishments, they don't stay open if they don't serve food and drink. That's how they keep the lights on, the food and beverages. That's the case in a lot of comedy venues, a lot of music venues. Well, Ron, what about for instance, where an artist rents a venue where it's just a black box theater where people just bring in their own food and drinks and they just rent? Well, then you're not in the business of having those artists there. You're in the business of providing a facility. That's what you're in the business of. If people didn't rent out your theater, nothing would ever happen there. So a lot of people are freaking out about AB5, and I don't see what all the commotion is really about. I think the carve-outs are very apparent, and I don't think that California is going to screw over show business. I think California realizes show business, not something we want to screw over. So some of the biggest musicians union presence in the country and probably in the world, I don't know that for sure, but I'd imagine possibly in the world too, is in Los Angeles. I don't think they're going to want to screw over musicians or comedians. They know that show business happens here. They're not going to want to screw that over. So I don't think that freelancers really have something to worry about. They're just going to have to iron out the details and make sure the fine print is apparent. Who does have something to worry about with this are places like Lyft and Uber. Because how are you going to make the claim that providing rides isn't the usual course of your hiring entity's business? Well, we know how they're doing it. They're saying that technology is their business. That's their claim. They're claiming, no, it's because of the technology is the main entity of our business. It's the fact that you can call it up on an app instead of calling it a taxi company. Oh, really? So getting the ride doesn't matter? If the ride doesn't happen, that's just no big deal. People log on to Lyft and Uber not because they need to get somewhere, but because they think, what a cool app. Is there a free game I can play on this? So that's who it's going to hit. And what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to treat their workers a lot better. Because guess what? Those workers generated the wealth for them at the top. And, I don't think that, I think this legislation, assuming it is unrolled properly, will do a lot more good than I think any harm will be ironed out. I really do. But the good it'll bring is going to be pretty significant. Now, I know you're thinking, well, what about people who, they just drive Uber and Lyft on the side a little bit to supplement their income? Well, there's a number of things that'll probably happen there. First of all, there'll be part-time employee designations. Just like there's full-time, there's going to be part-time too. So, if somebody falls into that category, they still want to drive part-time, there will be part-time opportunities. Second of all, just because someone's designated as an employee doesn't mean that they don't have any flexibility in their lives anymore. There's tons of flexible work environments in our day and age. So it's very plausible that someone could be designated an employee, still make their own schedule. They'll just have a certain hours they have to drive every week. That'll probably be what happens. If you're part-time, you have to drive X amount of hours. If you're full-time, you have to drive X amount of hours. And then you get a decent wage and you get healthcare and you get paid time off and you get treated better while still enjoying the flexibility you had prior. Because most of the people, every driver I've ever met that drives Lyft or Uber full-time, they drive a lot. And some of them make better livings than others because there is, and I've never done it, so I don't really know much about it, but I know there are ways where you can really maximize what you pull in each hour, and there's how-to videos on YouTube about it. I've never watched any of them. I don't know how it works, but I know like there are ways where some people make a lot and other people don't make so much. But so that's what's going on with this piece of legislation. And that's what's going on with the lawsuit with California. And yeah, I think it's a good thing that Lyft and Uber are going to have to treat their workers with decency, and that they're going to have to give them living wages, and that they're going to have to give them a decent work environment and benefits and pay time off, because they generate all the wealth for that company. They should be designated as employees, and they do meet option B. The person who performs that work you know, or excuse me, they don't meet option B. They don't. The person performs work that is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. If you are a transportation app, the transportation is the usual course of the hiring entity's business, pun intended. So there you go. That's what's going on there. So here's a little bit of music news for you. Or no, wait, I'm sorry. This is something else. The music news will be last. Amazon. Speaking of companies that always do the right thing, Amazon. Amazon was saying that they were going to pay workers who tested positive for coronavirus. Were they, though? Well, this BuzzFeed headline says no, they weren't. Amazon didn't pay this worker who tested positive for the coronavirus until a reporter asked questions. What a shocker. What a shocker. Hey, it's like they asked in the New York Times the other day, do people need to strike for corporations to do the right thing? Do people need to strike? Yes, people need to strike because stuff like this happens. Amazon didn't pay this worker who tested positive for the coronavirus until a reporter asked questions. Amazon has publicly promised to pay workers who test positive for coronavirus or are quarantined because of the coronavirus, but some say they have not received that money. So here's the gentleman right here. Thomas Busan, a father of two who works at an Amazon warehouse outside of Philadelphia, tested positive for coronavirus in early April. Under Amazon policy, Busan was eligible for paid sick leave, but Amazon stopped paying him the day after he got home from urgent care with a fever of 104, labored breathing, and a diagnosis of a potentially fatal disease. It is the latest example of Amazon failing to promptly follow through on its promise to pay 2 weeks of wages to employees who are sick or quarantined. In some cases, workers have said they have consequently missed payments on their bills or had to borrow money from family or friends. We are working with employees on an individual basis and gathering the information we need to approve extra time off with pay for quarantine and or diagnosis of COVID, an Amazon spokesperson said in a statement. With over 1,000 sites around the world and so many measures and precautions rapidly rolled out over the past several weeks across safety, pay, benefits, and operational processes, there may be instances where we don't get it perfect. But we can assure you that's just what they are, exceptions. Really? Really? Because all we hear about are situations where someone tested positive for the virus and wasn't even sent home, where people aren't provided with adequate equipment, with adequate sanitary tools, and people are being overworked, and that your facilities are a breeding ground for COVID-19 and nothing is being done about it. And when people protest, they are shamed, they are fired in some cases. And Amazon's been pulling stuff like this before COVID-19. So you want to say those are exceptions? By the way, how are you still able to orchestrate all of your operations, but somehow when it comes to payroll, that's where some things slip through the cracks? We're making sure people are working. We're making sure orders get filled. Yeah, we're doing that. That's operating like a smooth, fine machinery, baby. But, well, when it comes to paying people who got sick, well, we might make some mistakes there. Whoopsies. I don't know what happened. We found out someone tested positive for COVID-19, and we thought, do we cut them a paycheck? Do we not? And then we just slipped up there. Yeah, nice try, Amazon. Nice try. Another fail from your PR stooge. Amazon said it would deposit the money in Busan's bank account after BuzzFeed News requested information about his case. What a country we live in. What a country we live in where, for corporations to do the right thing, we better hope that BuzzFeed does something about it. And no offense to BuzzFeed, but you get my point. We shouldn't be relying on BuzzFeed to hold corporations accountable so that they do the right thing for workers. That's not something that should happen. All right, so let's see what else is going on here. Amazon employees have complained that the department that handles sick leave payments was understaffed even before the coronavirus pandemic, and it has since been overwhelmed by the upswing in cases. This is, by the way, this is common PR, by the way. This is a common PR tactic. First, they make it out like this is an exception, and then what do? You blame someone underneath you. So what are they doing? They're not blaming the company culture. They're blaming the workers. They're blaming other workers. Oh, the department that handles the sick leave, they're understaffed. They might have messed up. They're really understaffed right now. Come on, don't be mad about this because the workers handling the sick leave, they're so overworked. So they're trying to deflect blame. They're saying it's not us as a company. It's not that we as a company who have not even sent people home who have coronavirus, who have, by the way, not provided adequate air conditioning in warehouse facilities. We'd rather have an ambulance parked outside so when people collapse from heat exhaustion, they can just be taken to the hospital. We've experimented with having electronic machines on people's hands, and when they make a wrong move, they get shocked mildly. We don't pay living wages anywhere. Jeff Bezos is the richest person on the face of the planet, refuses to provide a living wage for the people who make who send out the packages. And I'm sure it's not. I'm sure it's just a clerical error that this guy who tested positive for COVID-19 wasn't getting paid when he was sick after Amazon said they were going to do it. I'm sure it's just a clerical error. In fact, it's the workers' fault. It's the workers' fault because they're understaffed. Nice try. Nobody should fall for that. So Passan started feeling sick in late March. He worried it could be coronavirus, especially because he knew some of his coworkers at the Amazon warehouse where he worked had already tested positive. So he isolated from his wife and children, but in their small apartment in South Philadelphia, it was hard to maintain social distance. Before long, his family was sick too. So here's how he describes it. Had a fever of 104. Next day, started losing all smell and taste. Felt very weak. It's hard to breathe. And as soon as he received his diagnosis, he sent documentation to Amazon. The company had previously announced in early March that any employee who tested positive would get up to 2 weeks of pay. He expected to be paid as usual on his April 17th payday, but he wasn't. And it's just 2 weeks that they're promising. They wouldn't even pay the guy for 2 weeks. Like other Amazon employees who spoke with BuzzFeed News, Passan said when he called the Employee Resource Center, he was told he'd hear back within a few days. They never called back. Almost every day, here's what he had to say. Almost every day, I call them to prove my case and escalate my case so I can get paid. I tried so many times, believe me, he said. The only answer I get is someone will call you in 2 business days. And then after 2 business days, they don't call you for 1 month. Finally, last week, Passan reached out to BuzzFeed News, which has repeatedly written about workers who are not being paid despite having symptoms of COVID-19 or being instructed to quarantine by a doctor. In April, BuzzFeed News reported that at least 8 employees who had been told to stay home by doctors hadn't received payment as promised. When asked about those cases, the company publicly promised employees who had been quarantined by a doctor would eventually be paid. Nearly 4 weeks later, 4 of those employees, most of whom asked not to be named out of fear of retribution, said they've since received some payment from Amazon, though most said they had received less money than they thought they were owed. An employee on short-term disability leave receives just 60% of their usual paychecks. And you don't hear about this on MSNBC. You don't hear about this on CNN. You don't hear about this on Fox News. And this is what Amazon does. This is what Amazon and companies like them do. So next time the New York Times asks, is it going to take a strike for these corporations to do the right thing? Yes, it's going to take a big strike. It's going to take a big general strike. All right. Good old United States. Where, will you get your paycheck or not? Well, I guess you need BuzzFeed to step in. You need BuzzFeed to step in. All right. So here's a little bit of music news that was interesting. So Donald Trump went to a factory where he was supposed to wear a mask and he didn't wear a mask. Pence recently did the same thing. I don't know what you're proving by not wearing a face mask in a facility where you should be using a face mask. Like, why? And I know Pence said something like his mom told him he didn't have to, or, those people that do that right now, that's the equivalent of that person who, when you're like you're in a group, maybe you're going on a road trip and you're all in a vehicle together, and one person just doesn't wear their seatbelt because they think it makes them really cool by not wearing a seatbelt. Like, they're not wearing their seatbelt, and the thing beeps, like the car beeps, like beep beep beep, and it's annoying for everyone there. And somebody in the car says, "Hey, yeah, it's beeping because you don't have your seatbelt on." And the person goes, "Yeah, okay." And they still won't put your seatbelt on. They won't do it. They just won't put their seatbelt on because they're very cool. They are so cool by not putting their seatbelt on. You're so incredibly cool. By the way, guess who has two thumbs and would be dead if it wasn't for a seatbelt? This guy. This guy. When I was in my accident in 2013, I went full on into a median. If it wasn't for a seatbelt, I'd be dead. I guarantee you I would have went through that windshield. And this was a highway. So there was a median separating the highway this way and the highway that way. So had I not had my seatbelt on, I would have went head first through a windshield into oncoming traffic. There is no way I would have survived that. So a seatbelt caused me to have bruised ribs. Sleeping was uncomfortable for a couple weeks. Yeah, longer than that, actually. Actually, it was. I mean, that's the thing. It's like, but I guarantee the airbag would not have stopped me from going through that windshield, and I would have, it just wouldn't have. The timing wouldn't have been, because when I hit, and I mean, I don't remember it like super well, but I mean, the way when I hit and I went back, then the airbag, I mean, that's kind of how I remember it. Although, it's foggy. I mean, usually you don't remember every single detail when something like that happens. And I don't either. But anyway, so here's what Trump did. And here's the goofy music news. The song Live and Let Die was blasting as Trump visits a mask factory. As Trump toured an N95 mask manufacturing plant in Phoenix on Tuesday, his visit to the facility was accompanied by a head-scratching musical soundtrack. The Paul McCartney penned Live and Let Die, as performed by Guns N' Roses, which, by the way, that is our song of the day today. Live and Let Die. Listen to the Guns N' Roses version or the Paul McCartney version. It was the theme song for a James Bond movie, which, if memory serves me right, not one of my favorite James Bond movies. The president and his entourage were touring a Honeywell factory that produces the masks worn by medical workers to protect them from breathing in the deadly virus, standing next to a green bin filled with hundreds of masks, and notably unfaced masked Trump watched an employee work. As the music segued from the Animals' House of the Rising Sun into the song McCartney wrote and recorded for the James Bond film of the same name. And the song, of course, is Live and Let Die. Now, here's what's interesting. Nobody else, if you look at this photo here, nobody else has a mask on either. I can't help notice that, like no one else has a mask on either. I don't know if maybe they all just decided to have a measuring contest right then and there. Like, I'm not going to wear a mask. Oh, well, if he's not going to wear a mask, I won't wear a mask either. I, too, will not wear a mask. Am I cool now? Why don't you just, honestly, why don't the three of you just whip them out and measure? Just do it. That's what you want. That's what this is all about. Just whip it out, have your measuring contest, and whoever wins has bragging rights or wins whatever money you put on the table. And then you can put your mask on like adults. It's like, what are you proving? I don't take proper medical precautions during a pandemic because I'm so cool. That's like James Dean cool. Remember when the Fonz? Remember when there was coronavirus in that episode of Happy Days? And what happened was there was the coronavirus, the pink squeegee thing, and it was coming after the Fonz. And the Fonz was just like, Ew, and he hit a jukebox and the song started playing and the coronavirus ran away. Do you remember that episode? It's because the Fonz is so freaking cool. So that song was blasting. Now, the big thing, and here's the article here. If this ever-changing world in which we live in makes you give in and cry, say live and let die. So was it just a coincidence, or was it somebody, sending a message, sending a kind of a message of irony? Because maybe they saw Trump and all his buddies be like, we're not going to wear masks. We're not doing it. Trump's not wearing a mask. Well, Pence didn't wear a mask the other week. So if Pence didn't wear a mask, Trump can't wear a mask either, because we are king cool. So we're not going to wear it. Look at us. And then that song started playing. I haven't seen that movie in a long time, but if memory serves me right, it was not my favorite Bond movie. I used to watch a lot of the James Bond movies as a kid. And some of my favorites, I know that Goldfinger's one of my favorites. Dr. No's up there. And I actually liked For Your Eyes Only. I know a lot of people do not like For Your Eyes Only. A lot of people like any Roger Moore Bond movie. They're like, no, thank you. But I actually liked For Your Eyes Only. I might have been one of the only people. but I did like it. And, here's what I got to say about it. James Bond, he'd wear a face mask if it was warranted. Remember that, Donald Trump, Mike Pence. James Bond, he'd wear a face mask. All right, guys, Graham Elwood and I have another show this coming Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. RonPlacone.com. You can grab those tickets. It's open to the entire internet because it's on Zoom. Boom. RonPlacone.com this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Those Zoom shows have been a lot of fun. They make me feel a little less alone. They're a good time. I hope you will consider attending. RonPlacone.com for those tickets. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll be back tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime, you know the drill. Lucy says meow. I say peace. Peace.